Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Potty Plan Entertainment. Per usual, I'm your boy, the report of the week. That's a joke. My name is Chris, and in case you don't know, I review movies and I rank them on a scale of 0 to 100 in increments of 5. Peep the shirt, guys. Look, I wish that, I found this at Walmart the other day, and I was like, dang, man, why wasn't this available before I saw the Dial of Destiny? I was like, this would have been great to wear in the review, but whatever, alas. We are here now, and we are talking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. We have one more movie to do in our Indiana Jones series after this. I did see the new Mission Impossible. I'm planning to go see Joyride if I can, and I got more content coming, but I really want to wrap up Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So, this is one of my all-time favorite movies. Okay, I've watched this movie a million times over the course of my life. Okay. There is no denying my unconditional, undying love for this franchise. This is my favorite movie franchise of all time. But ever since I was a kid, even when I was a kid, this has always been my least favorite of the original trilogy. Now, I have a reason for it, and I think it might make sense to you. Maybe it won't. But it's just, there's things that happen in this movie that even when I was a kid didn't really quite work for me, but that don't necessarily bother me too much to the point where it ruins my viewing experience of the film. But I love this movie. When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch this one very much. I mean, I was allowed to watch it, and then when my parents discovered it was PG-13, they took it away from me. But they let me watch Temple of Doom because it was PG. I know. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that's just the way it was for me growing up. I couldn't watch this one in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is by far the least violent movie in the franchise. I would say even less violent than the new one, maybe. But Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull... Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is one of the best action movies ever made. It is definitely one of my biggest inspirations for me sitting here doing this YouTube thing right now. I can't deny my love for this film. It's just fantastic. So let's talk about it. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade stars Harrison Ford, Sean Connery, Allison Doody, Denholm Elliott, John Rhys-Davies, River Phoenix, Michael Byrne, and Julian Glover. And it was directed by Steven Spielberg. In this movie, Indiana Jones is now in 1939, and he is tasked by some dude who's really a secret Nazi. Spoiler alert. Yeah, this movie's been out since the 80s. Okay, I'm going to talk about spoilers. Played by Julian Glover, to go find pieces that may lead to the finding of the Holy Grail. All the while, his father, played by Sean Connery, has gone missing, and he's got to find him too. So, like I said, this is one of the best action movies I've ever made. If you've never seen Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, what are you doing with your life? Like, your existence is pointless if you've never seen this movie. I'm sorry, but there is nothing you can do in life that will justify your existence unless you watch this movie. I'm just kidding, obviously. But it's so good. And let's get into why. So, I already talked about my nostalgia for this movie. I grew up with it. It's great. I can't wait. If I ever have kids of my own one day, I can't wait to show them all three of these original movies. I hope they love them just as much as I do. The action is fantastic. The action in this movie is so memorable. That's what this Indiana Jones franchise, that's what this does so well, is they create memorable action. And it's something you don't really get a whole lot nowadays outside of Mission Impossible. You know, I mean, they're not just gunfights that are there for the sake of gunfights. They're not just fistfights that are there for the sake of fistfights. They're memorable. There's really more going on there. It's not just action for the sake of action. It has meaning, and there's something memorable about it. That tank sequence is one of the biggest, in my opinion, achievements in cinematic history. They got a real tank, and they hung Harrison Ford off the side of it, and then started crushing him into the side of a canyon. That's all real, dude. He fights a dude on top of a moving tank. I just mean, like, where is this stuff now? Why don't we get more great, juicy action like this nowadays? That boat chase sequence is fantastic. The motorcycle chase is fantastic. There's always something memorable about it, like the jousting scene. Indiana Jones jousts a Nazi on a motorcycle. Why don't we get stuff like this anymore? It's all so good. It's so exciting. Every time I watch this movie, I get hyped. It's all so exciting. I haven't felt that way in so long. Like when I watched Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 in theaters, I got excited during these action sequences. I was on the edge of my seat, and it's stuff you don't get very often nowadays. And this movie really, really nails that. The flashback. This movie opens with the flashback sequence of young Indiana Jones and how he got his fedora and how it leads us into 1939 when he's still looking for the Cross of Coronado. And River Phoenix, he actually does kind of look like a young Harrison Ford, and he plays him great. Harrison Ford has the scar on his chin that he got from a car accident, and they actually worked that into the story, which I thought was pretty cool. That opening sequence is great. I really love it. That's why I love Dial of Destiny does a flashback sequence too, and that's great as well. And it's also on a train. Like this franchise does both those flashback sequences great. The characters are fantastic. They're so memorable. Harrison Ford is so memorable as Indiana Jones. Sean Connery, this was the first thing I ever saw him in, and holy crap, is he good in this movie. And he's only 12 years older than Harrison Ford, but he plays his father, and the two of them have this phenomenal chemistry. They are so good. Alison Doody is so hot in this movie, and she plays like the sexy Nazi that's really, you don't know she's a Nazi, so she's tricking Indiana Jones. She's great in it. Denholm Elliott is fantastic as Marcus Brody. John Rhys Davies, met him before. Most wonderful dude in the world. He's fantastic as Sala. And I love Julian Glover as the villain in this movie. He was also in Empire Strikes Back, which I'm assuming that's how he met George Lucas. Let's see. The casting of this movie, fantastic. Everybody's amazing. The dialogue in this movie is really good too. I love the conversations between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery in this movie. You left just when you were becoming interesting because I'm Sean Connery. I also love having the girlfriend character in this movie be a villain. That was a great twist. That was very, very clever writing. That's something I probably wouldn't have thought of myself. And so that's very clever. I like that they did that. It was different. It was like in Dial of Destiny how they didn't just have a MacGuffin. They had a MacGuffin broken up into two parts, and Indiana Jones has to find those two parts. That was something different for this franchise, and I really like that. This movie has a lot of heart and a lot of emotion. Like, this movie does such a good job at humanizing Indy. This was the movie where we really, really, really got to know Indiana Jones as a person and got to see him really as a human. And when him and Sean Connery hug after the tank goes off the cliff and Indy rolled off the back and grabbed the cliff and they all thought he was dead and they embrace each other. I thought I lost you, boy. I thought I lost you too, sir. It's so beautiful, man. It's so beautiful. When Ford and Connery meet, it very quickly establishes their relationship. Junior, yes, sir. And then you immediately see like he's always unimpressed with everything that he does. That's a running joke throughout this whole movie. He's either unimpressed or he doesn't really notice anything cool that he does. And he has that same relationship that Indy had with Short Round in Temple of Doom. Shorty, quit fooling around with that kid and get down the cart. He doesn't even realize that he just saved his life. So they have this good running gag with that. You really buy them as father and son. They're just perfect together. And I'm so glad that Sean Connery agreed to do this because I know that they were worried that he wouldn't because he was James Bond. He's used to being the hero, and in this movie, he's not. He's a sidekick that can't really do a whole lot because he's not awesome like his son. So it's amazing that he even wanted to do this movie, but we're also grateful that he did because he's just fantastic in it. The writing in this movie is really good. It's an amazing script. It's an amazing story. It's awesome. I love it. The special effects are great. There's a lot of practical effects in this movie. I think there's a tad bit of use of CGI when Julian Glover's character dies. I think there's a little bit of CGI mixed in that, but a lot of that was practical too. The pacing is fantastic. This movie is constantly on the move. All the first four movies do this the best. I mean, I really like Dial of Destiny, but the first four movies really do that the best, where the pacing is constantly on the move. This movie never stops. It never wastes time. There's never anything there where you're like, they probably could have cut that. No, everything is there for a reason. It all works, and it's amazing writing. The humor is really good too. This is the funniest of all the Indiana Jones movies. Temple of Doom and Last Crusade in particular do a really, really good job with the movie. Marcus Brody is fantastic in this. The whole he'll blend and disappear and you'll never see him again. With any luck, he's got the grill already, and then it immediately cuts to him and he's just completely lost and confused, and nobody speaks English around him. Indy meeting Hitler and Hitler thinking he just wanted his autograph was so funny, and that really shows like Hitler was so power hungry, and he had what he wanted in his hand and he couldn't even see past that. That's so poetic to the type of person he was in real life. I love that scene. That's like possibly my favorite moment in the entire Indiana Jones franchise, or at least my favorite humorous moment, was Indy meeting Hitler. The tagline of this movie is actually pretty funny too. The man in the hat is back, and now he's bringing his dad. That's pretty funny too. The suspense in this movie is great. When Indy is at the Grail Temple, they find the Grail Temple, and Julian Glover shoots Sean Connery, and he forces Indy to go get the Grail to save his father. And he's walking up, and you got the two statues of the lions there, and that score is like really eerie, and there's all the cobwebs in front of him he can't see, and he's walking, and he's scared to death. And he's saying, only the penitent man will pass. Only the penitent man will pass. The penitent man kneels before God. Kneels! And then he gets down and he rolls across the floor and stops a blade. A foe! Like the tension just builds and builds and builds. And it does that so well. It's amazing. It's terrifying. It's amazing. It's filmmaking at its best. The third act really raises the stakes, and he has to pass the trials to save his dad. I just this whole third act, it really, really worked. When he has to spell the name of God, which is Jehovah, but he has to spell it in Greek, and then he has to trust God to catch him so he doesn't fall down the giant abyss of darkness. I mean, it's great. And then of course the final trial was him having to choose the Grail. It just builds, and it's great. The whole movie still holds up. It holds up. It's definitely gonna hold. It's amazing. This movie is going to hold up better than Dial of Destiny and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull will. You know why? Because the effects are real. Take note, Marvel. Let's see. The horror elements in this movie are great. That's something I was kind of missing in the two editions after this one. But the horror elements are really great. The decapitation scene is great. The rapid aging of Julian Glover is freaking great. But my parents hated that moment when I was a kid, but I always thought it was super cool. The cinematography is beautiful. All the action is filmed fantastic. The costuming is great. And this is one of those movies. I said it in the last two reviews, and I'm going to say it in this one. Indiana Jones gets really dirty in this movie. The actors are dirty. Their clothes are all torn up. They have dirt and blood all over their faces. Like the hell that they've been through is reflected on them. That's how you do proper costuming and makeup work. Let's see. It's also really interesting. The whole legend of the Holy Grail and the fictitious parts of it that they build up around this movie. It's all really interesting. The music by John Williams is fantastic. Belly of the Beast is like the best freaking score. It's amazing. I love listening to that. I'll listen to it when I'm driving. And I love that they put it in Dial of Destiny. Belly of the Beast is just such an amazing score. The Indiana Jones theme always gets me hyped. All the music in this movie, it's just so freaking good. John Williams knocked it out of the park. And these action sequences work in partly major because of John Williams' fantastic score. I also love how Indy and his dad they do the Grail trials together. I mean, they can't really hear each other, but he knows what he's going through, which I guess is kind of a plot hole because he couldn't remember the trials. He's like, I wrote them down in my diary because I didn't have to. But then once he gets shot, he knows everything Indy's going through. It's a little bit of a plot hole, but I love how they do it together. You know, like they don't have like a psychic connection or anything. It's not anything stupid like that, but it's just you know he knows what Indy's going through, and Indy has his dad's notes, and so it's like they're there together, but they're not actually. It's very poetic, and I like it very much. I also love Indiana. Indiana, let it go. Throughout the whole movie, he's calling him Junior, and he's saying, "Don't call me Junior." And then finally, in Indy's moment of greed, I can almost reach it, Dad, when he's falling down the cliff and the Grail is sitting there on the ledge because Allison Duty passed the seal after the Grail Knight told her not to. And so it starts the rupture of the tomb. And the floor is opening up. And he falls down down and hang on to the cliff trying to get the Grail. And he finally says what he likes to be called to get his attention. Indiana. Indiana. Let it go. It's such a beautiful moment. Those two are just so great together. And then when his whole life he's been obsessed with the Holy Grail, and then seeing holding the Holy Grail, drinking from it, and then seeing the Grail Knight. It's beautiful, and Sean Connery plays it fantastic. He was so good in this. Rest in peace, Sean Connery. You were a true talent, one of Hollywood's most true actors. And it's very emotionally satisfying overall. So, like I said, this might be, I might regret saying this one day. I might change my mind, but this is kind of my least favorite one in the franchise. And the reason for it is because there's a lot of moments in this movie that are very hokey. Like, Indy has a torch, right? Like, he wraps in the petroleum in the river petroleum. Remember in the Paris catacombs when they're looking for the body of the Grail Knight, and they're looking for the shield so they can get the next clue. And there's sparks dripping off of it into the river, and it's not lighting up. Or how when he's underneath it, he has his eyes open, looking for a way out. But I'm like, wouldn't that burn your eyes? The whole thing with the birds, the chirp, 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 when Sean Connery sends the birds up to take down the Nazi jet. I mean, what are the odds of that really working? You know what I mean? They take the boats without the keys for the boats. Sean Connery, like when they're tied up in the chair, by the way, I love that sequence. When they're tied up in Brunwell Castle and it's on fire. Dad, what? Dad, what? Dad, what? Dad, what? Head for the fireplace. Oh. You can clearly tell Sean Connery throws the lighter and he didn't actually drop it. In the fireplace, when they're in the fireplace and it's spinning to reveal the secret Nazi room, it's so great. But when you watch the sequence, you'll notice that the door stops like wherever the script needs it to. It doesn't have a pattern that it follows. There's a lot of stuff like that in this movie. Or the worst one for me, and I've always hated this moment. I hated it when I was a kid, is when he takes the rock and sticks it in the gun on the side of the tank, and they pull the trigger and the shot is reflected back into it, and it like blows up the end of the gun. Like, this must be the world's most powerful rock. That makes no freaking sense at all. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff like that in this movie. But some of it's played for laughs, so it kind of works, but it's all in the midst of like greatness, so you can kind of drown it out. But there's a lot of stuff in that it just doesn't really work for me. And I get Temple Doom has a lot of stuff like that too. Like, I get the whole raft thing doesn't really make much sense. It doesn't make any sense that this little Asian kid, even if he knows kung fu or karate or whatever, can take on a group of grown men by himself. Like, he does that in the movie. He kicks one and they all fall down in a line. I mean, it's pretty hokey. Like, the sequels to Raiders are a lot more hokey than Raiders is. So I can kind of forgive it because there's a lot of suspension of disbelief. But I think that's why this one hasn't always quite worked for me as well as the other two, because I just feel like there's more of that. I have to give this movie more of a suspension of disbelief versus the other two films. But if you disagree, please let me know in the comments. I really want to know. Like, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know. I'm genuinely curious to hear your opinion. I really want to know. So please tell me in the comments. I want to hear it. But none of that is to take away from this movie. This is one of the greatest action movies ever made. It is one of my all-time favorite movies. if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's well worth your time. You're going to watch this movie and be like, wow, Chris, thank you for that recommendation. I give you a kiss now. Mwah. See, like that will be you after you watch Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade for the first time, because I recommended it. Okay, it's one of the best movies ever made, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade absolutely, of course, gets a 100. I wouldn't dare give it anything else. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I love it. It's not my favorite indie film. For a lot of people it is, and watching it, I understand why. Like, even like the fight scene on top of the tank, right? When he's fighting the Nazi. I remember the first time I saw this movie. You know, in every Indiana Jones film, except for Dial of Destiny, he has like this big like fist fight scene in a dangerous setting. Well, that one doesn't have like as much like punching. You know what I mean? It's not as much as of a one-on-one confrontation. There's a lot of stuff going on there, right? With other characters as well. Everybody's somewhat involved in this, and there's just a lot of things going on. Harrison Ford looks awesome riding that horse while getting shot at by a tank. It's perfect. I love it. It's amazing. But the first time I saw this movie, I didn't even realize that was supposed to be his big fight scene of the movie until they were riding their horses up on the Grail Temple, and I was like, oh, that was it, because it's not as much of a one-on-one punching match, but it's still a great fight. And you know what? It's a heck of a lot better than the nothing that Dial of Destiny gave us when it came to the big fight scene. So it's a great sequence. That tank sequence just gets me hyped every time with John Woo's fantastic score. Okay, I'm gonna go on about this for a million years. This is just such a good movie. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's one of the best movies ever. Okay, what? All right, I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Pilot Planetarium for more. Hit the like button. Leave me review suggestions in the comments down below. And that's it. I love you, and I wish you all fortune and glory. Bye.